This is Big Mo.
Yeah, and this is Marcus, and this is Don't Believe the Hype.
The good, the bad, the ugly of fantasy sports.
Yeah. Welcome into a very special episode of Don't Believe the Hype. I'm Marcus. I'm one half of Don't Believe the Hype. Maurice is somewhere. I'm trying to figure out if he's going to start Spencer Ware or Sharkandrick West today. But nonetheless, we're here. Got my guy Jordan here. We're going to get into the opening weekend of football.
Right.
So we're going to start with a couple matchups that I feel from a fantasy standpoint will have a significant impact on your team, not just from a scoring standpoint, but from an individual player standpoint.
Sure.
So the first game is Green Bay at Jacksonville.
Right.
Aaron Rodgers is on the road, sunny Jacksonville, revamped Jacksonville defense.
Absolutely.
Still needs a little experience, but nonetheless, not last year's defense.
Sure.
So how do you feel Aaron Rodgers will
Well,
approach that?
one of the funny things about this game is if you're going to go with a game like this in a GPP lineup, you have to be very, very careful about the blowout potential. Mm-hmm. So if Aaron Rodgers is going to go out there and throw 1 million touchdowns in the first half, he's not going to be throwing the ball late, so he might not be getting as many fantasy points as he's projected to get. He's the highest quarterback on the slate. So, but what that is going to do is Blake Bortles is going to end up throwing the ball a ton in the third quarter trying to catch up to the game. So there's not going to be enough rushing attempts for your running backs on Jacksonville. So from a fantasy standpoint, I would really maybe stay away from Aaron Rodgers per se, and maybe even go with a couple Blake Bortles lineups in my GPPs just to cover the blowout potential in that game. So that's kind of what I would. But my strategy on that game would be if I was going to go with Blake Bortles lineups.
And honestly, last year I kind of rode the Blake Bortles bandwagon as much as I could because last year they were in a lot of blowout games where they just decided to just drop back and throw the ball, and it was beneficial not only to Bortles, who was in my lineup, but when I would do daily fantasy, I would have Allen Robinson and maybe even Allen Hurns on the same team.
Yeah, I mean,
mixed in with a little Julius Thomas.
It's a great strategy to have because they weren't in a lot of games late.
Right. But from an offensive standpoint, they did put up numbers.
But then you have the interceptions to worry about and all that. So it's a lot of things you have to go with Blake Bortles. I mean, I'm thinking he's gonna have a bigger year than last year. He's gonna be a breakout player.
Right.
I would go with more Blake Bortles lineups than Aaron Rodgers lineups today if I was gonna go with a couple of those for sure.
All right. Well, moving on to the second game that I had in mind. Oakland traveling to the Bayou to play New Orleans.
Sure.
All the experts seem to be already on that game. Yeah. So it's probably nothing new that we're going to tell you.
Absolutely.
In this segment.
well, maybe there is. Maybe I can come up with something. I would say, I know this is kind of like crazy, but in your cash game lineups, I would maybe say like you can go Amari Cooper and you can go Carr all the way if you want to go with that. But I would fade this game totally in my GPPs. Just because the ownership rating for those two are going to be huge. Even Drew Brees' ownership is going to be high in that game too because, we all know about how good Drew Brees is at home. So instead of going with Drew Brees, maybe you kind of want to go Mark Ingram lineups. And I know Mark Ingram screws everybody over in fantasy. We all know that. But a good contrarian play is if they're going to score, the Vegas line has his game projected really, really high. So if you're going to go with Mark Ingram instead of Drew Brees, what that's going to do is that's going to offset the ownership on Drew Brees. So if Mark Ingram has a 2 or 3 touchdown game, you're going to be one of the only people with them. Well, maybe like in a low percentage of people with them. So that's kind of like a strategy I would have. Also, but Latavius Murray is so weird. His price point is so low. It's $5,100 on DraftKings. And yeah, everybody loves Carr, everybody loves Cooper, but I feel like everybody's jumping on that to like fill up their flex parts. Like when I construct my lineups, I do my quarterback, wide receiver, and maybe tight end stack and put a defense on there, and then I come from the bottom with the flex. Mm-hmm. And my flex, I just kept ending up with Latavius Murray, and I'm just like, okay, like, well, if I'm gonna fade Carr and Cooper, then I'm gonna end up with a bunch of Latavius Murray lineups. That's kind of what I ended up with.
Right.
So that's a cool way of looking at it. Where if you're gonna play a tournament, then that's kind of the strategy you kind of want to implement.
Right. And when constructing your lineups out there, the flex spot is so critical, not only on your fantasy, whether it's ESPN, your season-long fantasy teams, but on your DraftKings as well, because with the flex spot, you can either roster a wide receiver, running back, or a tight end. You just need to kind of have a good idea as to what those individuals that are already established in your lineup as is are gonna do before you decide. When I do my lineups, I save the flex for last.
Yeah, me too.
Right.
I think that's probably the optimal strategy on how to do that for sure.
Right. Another matchup that could be possibly sneaky, and I say it because the Blitz brothers are in town. Rob Ryan and Rex Ryan.
Oh,
taking on their Rex's former employer, the Ravens today.
Yeah.
When I look at it on paper, I see that, we already know what we're going to get.
Right,
they're going to blitz,
yeah,
and then they're going to blitz, and then when they get tired of blitzing, they're probably going to blitz a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
If the offensive line can hold up Flacco today, he possibly could pick apart that secondary. And given the receivers that Flacco has now, Mike Wallace, Rashad Perryman, Kamar Aiken underneath, Steve Smith underneath, and then those two guys I mentioned before over top. It could be a really good day for this offense.
It could, and that's the great thing about playing tournaments is that like you can go with a couple Flacco lineups and you can go with Mike Wallace, and the Flacco to Wallace, that stack is gonna be, I think it's gonna be under-owned. And I think it's a really good option to have because we all know Flacco can throw 4 touchdowns. We all watch a bunch of Ravens games. But my favorite player on this slate this week is Sammy Watkins. And just because I know from watching like how AJ Green has dominated the Ravens over the years, I just have a feeling that Sammy Watkins is going to go out there and have a huge game. Tyrod Taylor has a high game. So what I do with my lineups, my non-Tyrod Taylor lineups, Flacco. I didn't go with many Flacco wins. The thing is, you can't get all that's another.
Just in general, just guys coming back playing their former teams.
Oh yeah.
As we've seen with Minnesota, the Sean Hill Sam Bradford experiment is about to be underway in a few. But I want to move to a 4:00 game. I want to talk about Detroit going to Indy. A lot of experts project this to be the highest scoring game of the week.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, so it goes back to everything else we've been talking about. Luck and Stafford are going to be highly owned in this slate today. The thing about it is, like, I think that this is I know what I've been talking about today with fading stacks like this because of the ownership, but I think this is kind of like an unfadable play. Right. I think that Andrew Luck, you kind of have to go with them just because of the biggest projections are so high. You have to put a couple Andrew Luck lineups out there and Ty and all that good stuff and even Stafford. Moncrief for sure. Yeah, Moncrief for sure, definitely. But also, like Stafford, I mean Stafford. I don't know. Is Golden Tate gonna play today? I mean, like we still don't know. We still don't know what Ebron's gonna play. Right. So it's kind of like a last minute decision that you can make. And good thing about that is if he does end up playing and you find out around like 12:30 today, that's gonna be a low owned play. Right. So that's gonna be a good thing to be able to construct your lineup around. Like sitting by your computer waiting for line block. This is something huge in basketball where you find out somebody's not playing at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock before the game starts. Right. You can just plug your Etuan Wars in the game and just get in there and just and try your luck with it. But I think this is unfadable. This is an unfadable game, even though it's going to be on the higher owned side just because of the Vegas projections.
Right. And the final game I wanted to touch on, that would be the Monday night game, 7 o'clock. Pittsburgh traveling to Washington, take on the Redskins. I looked at it from the fact that we kind of know what we're getting with the Steelers offense.
Sure.
We seen it last year. They didn't have Le'Veon. They were still able to put up numbers. Antonio Brown was the focal point of the offense. He still couldn't be stopped.
Yeah.
D'Angelo Williams filled in.
Sure.
He still has fresh legs from the time he was sharing carries with Jonathan Stewart in Carolina.
Sure.
So we know what we're getting with Pittsburgh.
Right.
Do we exactly know what we're getting from the Redskins?
No, we don't. But the thing about it is it's a short slate, and the Redskins are definitely going to be the lowest owned team out of the 4. So I would go with a bunch of, I don't know, like maybe I would go with See, the thing about it is when you have a short slate like that,
right?
Somebody else is gonna be thinking the same way I'm thinking. So I probably would just go with the Pittsburgh players. Just like when you have, this is another thing. When you have like a 4-game slate on any of the sports, you can go with like the high owned plays or whatever because it ends up just being who's projecting better than who because it's such a small like amount of players to choose from.
Right.
I would fade Washington just because. Even if like you're one of the only people with them in the low range, it's still gonna be a high enough percentage of a range for people to be able to exploit you. Right. So you kind of want to just go with Antonio Brown and your Roethlisberger and just hope for the best. I think I would just fade Washington in my opinion. But I mean, I could be wrong. He goes out there and throws 5 touchdowns and
then you make out right.
And,
right.
You never know, like because he can catch 60-yard touchdowns every play. So.
Right. And we still don't know what we're getting out of it. That's still a secondary. It's still a work in progress. They traded for Justin Gilbert from Cleveland to try to show up their corner situation.
What's the biggest line on that game? I'm not even sure what
I'm not
it
even
is.
sure.
Yeah, but
I'm not even sure what the line is on that. But I mean, it's also potential to be a shootout.
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
So we'll see. I mean, if I was doing a bunch of lineups on that, I'm not going to. But if I was going to do a bunch, of course I would do a couple Redskins win, but the percentage of them would be very low.
Right.
So that's how I would handle that.
When you look at week 1 as a whole,
sure.
Subtract the 5 games that we talked about. Do you have a sneaky play?
Sneaky play, Andy Dalton.
Andy Dalton.
I've been talking
against Revis Island.
Against Revis Island, because everybody talks, Revis Island, he's going to shut down one side of the field or whatever. But what he's been doing in recent years is shutting down the other side. So AJ Green on the other side with Andy Dalton, I feel like that's going to be a huge play today. And it's going to be a low owned. Mm-hmm. And if you're on it and it goes off well, you're going to be one of the people that are going to have something to say in the Millionaire Maker. So that's like the biggest, that's like, I did a bunch of Andy Dalton today. It may not work out for you, but the thing about putting tournament lineups out there is it's such a small percentage of your bankroll that you can make gambles like that with 1% of it. Like what it was 1% of my bankroll on GPPs I play. So you can figure it out that way. So that would be a sneaky play. Let me see if I can come up with another one. What was I? Let's see. Phillip Rivers, Keenan Allen.
It's possible.
That the thing about it is it's possible, so you never really know.
One last question. The most overused play today will be
Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott, he's 5,000 on DraftKings just because the price point didn't factor in Romo being hurt. He's going to be very highly owned. I don't know how well it's going to be. I don't have him in any of my lineups. I faded it completely just because I know how highly owned it's going to be. If he throws 4 touchdowns, I'm not winning the Millionaire Maker today, and I'm very happy with that.
So pretty much that wraps up week 1 in the NFL from a fantasy perspective.
Sure.
Good luck to everyone out there. Good luck to you, Jordan. Good luck to myself. Good luck to Maurice, wherever he is. Appreciate you coming through.
Thanks for having me, for sure.
May we all prosper today. May
we all win the million.
Right. May we all win the million. So from Marcus and Jordan, Don't Believe the Hype.
All right.
Signing off.
All right.